subject in MMA, and maybe we'll even get into the one that Ryan brought up. But since we've got a special guest this week, Nick, we have to talk about Nick Baldwin. So Nick, Ryan, I think we said a little Q&A, but Nick, do you got anything interesting going on? I know you do a lot over at the Score. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do there?
Sure. So at the Score, I am the MMA guy. I'm the only person covering MMA for the Score. I am the MMA news editor, and basically how my job works is I work 8-hour shifts like a normal job, and during that time, I'm responsible for writing articles about big MMA news, things that are going on in the sport, whether it's, you know, a fight is announced, or an injury happens, or John Jones does this bad thing, or someone says this bad thing, or Connor punches a guy in the face, or any of these happenings in the MMA stratosphere. I am basically responsible for covering that, for writing articles about all that stuff, and that's what I do. When news isn't happening, I might be doing interviews, I might be talking to fighters, doing feature work, previewing upcoming events, recapping events that happened. It's just, you know, covering MMA from all different kinds of angles. And we have an app. It's one of the most popular sports media apps in North America, and you can check out all of my content on that, and that's basically what I do.
We'll put a link to that in the show notes. For sure. I just pulled it up here now, and yeah. So I mean, it's, you know, it's pretty much like the same kind of thing you were doing over at Bloody Elbow. It looks like. But the one thing, like, do you get a chance to do a lot of features, or like when you got slow news, like, you know, like you talked about interviewing fighters and that? So
yeah, I mean, once in a while, I don't do a ton of that, and I actually think I'm going to be starting to do a bit more of that coming up in the new year. A lot of, like, the thing with the Score is that because I'm the only MMA person there, they still need me to be ready to do all the new stuff and all sort of the preview stuff. And so I don't I don't have a ton of extra time to do longer form pieces. I did put up an interview today with Demetrius Johnson. It was a bit of a longer form feature just on his mixed rules fight coming up with Rod Tang in December, talking about why he did that. So once in a while I'll do a bit of that, and as I said, I do think I'll be starting to do a bit more of that. But I'm the one and only MMA guy there, so news is priority on the Score app.
I'll let Ryan take the floor here in a second. I'll just give background for anybody that doesn't know. The Score actually started out as a TV station here in Canada, and then that, I guess, where you're on now, Nick, is pretty much exclusively online. And the Score TV channel kind of turned into Sportsnet 360, which is the kind of the alternate to TSN in Canada. So they carry anything TSN doesn't, mainly hockey, but also pro wrestling, and I don't think there's any MMA on there, but obviously there's plenty of content on the Score. I'm looking over the stuff you got here, and you got a lot of good stuff here. So I encourage people to check it out if you're into, our listeners for sure are going to be into the stuff you're doing. So hopefully you'll get some hits off of this. Ryan, you got any questions for Nick?
Yeah, I have a few. And anytime I talk to people about MMA, one of my very first things I always ask is, Nick, what got you into the sport? Of course, you're 21 years old. So, I mean, the UFC, has been around for longer than you've been alive, unlike me and Paul. But what kind of hooked you into the sport, and what also made you want to cover it, potentially for, not just for a living right now, but, a living in the future?
Yeah. So as far as how I got into it, it is pretty simple, to be honest. My dad has always been a fan. I don't know exactly how he stumbled upon UFC, but he's an old guy, so he was I guess probably in his 30s already when UFC 1 happened, and so he, I guess, watched UFC 1. He's essentially been watching it from the beginning, and just growing up in the same house as him. As I got older, I started. I watched one event. The first event, or really the first fight I remember seeing, was Brock Lesnar versus Alistair Overeem in 2011. And I didn't become hooked right away, but I started to become a bit more interested, actually not for a couple years after that. 2013, the end of 2013, when we had a stretch of big pay-per-views, GSP Hendricks, even Silva Weidman, both fights, the Pettis Bendo rematch. That was around the time I started getting seriously interested in this sport. And then as far as covering it, I can't say exactly when it crossed my mind that, hey, I can do this for a living. But before that, it was kind of just, I wanted, I wanted to write about something. I wanted a bit of a hobby. I had always been into creating websites, like I did for an online game I used to play. Like, this was back when I was 9 years old, and I made my own blog, and I just like talked about this game. And as my interest evolved, or went from this game and other things to MMA, which is a weird transition, but that's the way it happened. I created my own blog about the UFC and about MMA after I realized there was more than just the UFC. It was called MMA Junior. I had a few writers also contributing to the website. This is back in January of 2014. I was 13. And I did that for a couple of years. And then it was kind of, I would say when I started with Bloody Elbow is when I really started to think, hey, maybe this could be a job. Maybe this could be something I actually do for money and do to make a living and do to provide for a family that I have in a long time. Not right away. And yeah, it kind of just evolved from there. I started writing more and more. I started becoming more and more involved in Bloody Elbow's coverage of the sport, doing, writing on a regular basis, interviewing fighters, doing podcasts. And soon enough, I was just completely, my whole life was MMA. It was a hobby that turned into a job, and now I have no hobbies. I still am working on that one. But yeah, it was kind of just one step to another, and now I'm at the Score and doing this full time, and it's been the dream for a few years now, but it certainly wasn't always the dream. So it kind of just came out of nowhere, and I got lucky that I figured out what I wanted to do at a relatively young age.
Yeah, very, very nice. Do you remember the first? Well, everybody kind of remembers, but what was the first? First UFC and maybe first non-UFC events you ever went to, not necessarily as a reporter, but just as a fan or as a reporter or whatever.
Yeah, the first UFC I went to was actually where I met Paul, UFC Saskatoon in August of 2015. That was the Max Holloway, Charles Oliveira fight. Not a great fight in terms of how it played out. But it's aged well. We got a former featherweight champion and a current lightweight champion, so not a bad fight night to kick off my journey of going to UFC events. First one I covered was DC. Well, actually, it was Israel Adesanya versus Brad Tavares. It was a tough finale in July of 2018. And then the first non-UFC I went to we're going back to 2015. This was a few months after the Saskatoon UFC card. There was a local promotion in Saskatchewan called Prestige FC. It was actually headlined. The first show, which I went to, was headlined by UFC veteran Mike Biggie Rhodes. He got a submission win on that card. There's a few other somewhat notable bets on that card. So that was the first one I covered. First one non-UFC I went to. So Prestige FC, UFC Saskatoon. It was all born in the great province of Saskatchewan.
Oh, very, very cool. Two other questions I have real quick. Do you have a particular favorite fight? Anytime somebody asks me if they're getting into the sport, what's a fight or two that they should watch, to get them into it, and I always have the same couple of answers. But what about you? Do you have a particular favorite fight, at all, anywhere, or does it kind of?
You know what? I don't know if I really have a number one. This is, a bit of an obvious answer. I think a lot of people will have Robbie Lawler, Roy McDonald, too, up there. I actually really enjoyed the rematch between Jose Aldo and Chad Mendes. That's one that doesn't really get credit in terms of being like a fight of the year. Actually, back in 2014, it was a fight of the year candidate, but it's certainly not like one of the greatest fights ever. But I just remember really enjoying that one. Back in 2014, I'm trying to think of. There's been a lot of great fights, but in terms of one that I tell people about, sort of my go-to, I don't really have one. I would say Lawler McDonald too has to be up there though in terms of best fights I've seen live. And yeah, I mean, you guys can relate. That was a crazy fight.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's personally probably my favorite fight of all time. One fight, and I don't know if you've ever seen this fight, but one fight I always try to steer people towards watching it. You know, that kind of is just an incredibly underrated fight. Is the fight between Roger Huerta and Clay Guida. So if you've never seen that one, that's definitely worth going back and seeing. Kind of like it's back in 2007 before your days of watching it. But I mean that's a fight I always recommend. And one last question: now that you're 21, how's it going to feel when next time you go to Las Vegas and you can actually check into a casino hotel and legally walk through casino and all that? Is it kind of a sense of relief on that end?
That's going to be the best. I've been waiting for this moment. I had a fellow MMA reporter check me in 2018. I stayed with someone in 2019. I went to Milwaukee in 2018. Mike Rhodes checked me in. I've props to them. Thanks to them. I appreciate them. But yeah, to be able to get my own hotel is great. To be able to actually order a drink in Las Vegas is going to be great. I'm happy to be 21. I think that the U.S. drinking age is ridiculous. I think it's stupid. 18 is the way to go. Manitoba does it right. A few other provinces here in Canada does it right. But hey, it is what it is.
So I got just a couple quick follow-ups on what you were just talking about with Ryan. I remember when you were going to that Prestige FC show, you messaged me and asked me, "Hey, are you going to the Prestige show?" You're all excited, and I'm like, "Are you freaking kidding me?" Like, have fun. And then Ryan, what was your first question for him?
How I got started in MMA, I think is.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. I had a follow up on that too, and I can't remember now. So, you know what? No, I know what I was going to say. So when you got the job with Bloody Elbow, I remember we were exchanging DMs, and I was writing for the Observer, and Ryan was already writing for the Observer, and I kind of asked you, hey, what do you make and stuff, and we're not going to give that on the air or whatever, but what I will say is when you told me what you're getting, it was like, oh my god, like you probably don't even realize, but you're probably in like the top 1% of MMA writers on the internet in terms of what you're getting paid. So you've managed to land some good gigs.
Well, because it depends when we were having those conversations. Because I'll pull back. What do they call it in television? Pulling back the fourth wall or something like that. Like when I joined Bloody Elbow in November of 2015, it was basically like I pursued it. Like I reached out to them. Hey, is anything available? Whatever. I'm just happy to help. I'm starting out. Whatever. And Nate Wilcox, the editor over at Bloody Elbow still today, great guy. He basically got back to me and said, hey, we'd love to have you on the site, but we don't have any room in the budget right now. And so for the first 2 or 3 months, they literally gave me $25.
Okay, so I'll give you a hint. When we were talking, you had said that you told me what you were getting, and you said for that amount, you had to write 25 articles a week.
A week.
So
probably
that would be
a month. Probably.
I thought it was a week, and it was like 100 a month.
No,
maybe it was 25
I never,
a month.
For Bloody Elbow, I never wrote more than maybe 45 or so a month.
Okay, so for what they were paying you, you had to do a minimum of, maybe it was 25 a month.
Sure.
And which was more than I was doing. So it was like, okay, well, I'm not doing that. I'm not putting in that kind of work. So, I'm okay with that. Ryan does a ton of writing. But he, for him, it's more of a passion project. He does some excellent work in the Observer. I know you're not a subscriber, but if you ever get a chance to check out the Wrestling Observer, like Ryan does the UFC write-ups in there, and they're the top people in the industry are all reading that stuff. So it's pretty cool. And then he's got the weekly column he does here. So which I sent you a link to. So. But Nick's doing some great work over at the Score. And the only I had one last question for you, Nick. What's your go-to order at Tim's?
Oh, I'm like, I wouldn't consider myself like a big Tim's guy because I don't drink coffee, so that's the issue. Okay. So if I'm going to get a drink, I don't mind the frozen lemonades there. They're pretty good.
Have you ever had the creamy chills?
I have not.
Oh, you gotta try that.
I've heard they're way too sweet, but I might
They
give it a
are.
go.
So what you want to do is get it without the whipped topping.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you've ever had a Starbucks vanilla bean frappuccino, it kind of the vanilla creamy chill tastes like that.
Well, I haven't had one of those either, so I
Okay.
can't relate. I'm a
Okay.
fake Canadian probably.
No, you're also 21.
That's
and
true, that's true.
Not a lot of 21-year-olds drink. I drink so much coffee, it's ridiculous. I only thought of that because I'm looking at 2 Tim Hortons gift cards that are sitting right beside my microphone right now.
There you go.
Yeah. There you go. That's a